I'm Terry Stramba on behalf of the Artisan Fiber Mill Network, and it's my pleasure to introduce Rich Armstrong of The Great Game of Business. I love your tagline, by the way, bold moves to create your new normal. I think we're all feeling that right now, and I think your topic that I had talked about with your people, the 4 practical tips to mitigate business risk in a crisis, just kind of fits everybody at this point. And with that, I'll turn it over to you and let you tell us about that.
No, that's great. Well, it's interesting you mentioned the tagline, bold moves to to recreate your new normal. I think the challenge is understanding what that new normal really looks like, right?
Yeah.
Understanding what it all means. And I think all businesses are challenged with that. We specifically at our organization, we've kind of came into this crisis with a little different perspective than most, only because we've always ran our businesses or always structured our businesses to prepare us for these kind of situations. In fact, we've in our history of our business, since we've been around for 36 years now, is that we've been through 4 different recessions and really 2 different black swans, as we describe it. Unexpected events like we had in 9/11 and the economic shutdown in 2009, and of course this virus. And we started this business back in 1983 in the middle of a recession as well. So we were, give you a little history of SRC and how our business came to be, is that we were part of a organization called International Harvester. And International Harvester at the time in late 70s, early 80s was one of the largest organizations in the world at the time. It was kind of the Microsoft, Apple of the industrial age, so to speak. But they had some financial problems, and they were heading toward recession and in the early 80s, and they were running into a lot of financial issues. So they were selling off a lot of their assets and trying to conserve cash and trying to protect the business as much as they could. And one of those companies that was on the selling block was our little company in Springfield, Missouri, called at the time Springfield Renew Center. And we only had about 116 employees. So we were looking for different opportunities to basically save our business and our jobs here in Springfield, Missouri. And one of those opportunities was to do a management buyout. So there was about 13 managers, one including Jack Stack, our current CEO and one of our founders, pulled together roughly about $100,000 to buy a business from International Harvest for $9 million. So we started our business in a financial situation of an 89-to-1 debt-to-equity ratio. We owed the bank $8.9 million and only $100,000 of equity. And I don't know how old you are, Terry, but back in 1983, I don't know if you can guess what the interest rates were back then compared to now.
Yeah.
Any guesses?
You were a tad higher.
Yes. So we started that loan, at $8.9 million loan, at a sweet interest rate of 18%. So we actually owed our first debt payment due in February, the shortest month of the year. We owed more in our interest payment the first month in business than we actually had in equity in the business itself. So that's kind of the situation we started with, and we were in a depressed market. So when we started building some of our ideas and concepts about how to operate and manage and lead an organization, was really built from those early days of a crisis, right? How do you best manage a business during a crisis? And really those practices we began to use to help us in that time become great practices to carry through even during, good times.
Yeah.
So it's kind of position. And when I talk about that, when I talk about practices, I'm talking about, transparency, being open and honest about your communication with your people and making sure they understand the reality, right?
Right.
Not what we're hoping is going to happen, but what the is. It's practices like business education, making sure that everybody in the organization understands how the business makes money, how it generates cash, and what position it is, because when you come into a crisis, you need your people to have your back in terms of how you're going to work through this crisis. And a lot of this crisis, although it's a virus that we're working through, and it's very about, number one is keep your people safe, but number two is keep the business financially safe as well. So having that business education is important. Financial discipline, really understanding that, it's about forward focus. It's not what happened yesterday, but what we're going to do tomorrow. And then probably most importantly is finding ways to create small wins when maybe the big wins are not available right now, right? To keep people motivated, engaged about the business. So those are the kind of things that we created in those early days in 1983 and the early 80s, but have carried through as kind of our management process going forward. So in every economic recession or black swan that we've hit, we've really reverted back to those and just doubled down on those practices to make sure that that we can work through these crises, if that makes sense.
That does make a lot of sense. And I think it's something we really relate to. And you'll have to excuse the noise here. We're a small business and family owned. So we have a couple of visitors in and out. I think they'll leave now. And that probably leads into, I noticed that you talk a lot about open book management, and that's the sharing with your employees.
Yeah. I'll talk a little bit about that. It's really a term that was coined outside of us about what we were doing, but it's a little misleading, is that when we talk about open book, a lot of people think it's just about being transparent with your financials, but it's much more than that. It goes beyond that in terms of really, it's one thing sharing financial information, but your people really understand it, and what they understand about it, are they making better decisions because of it? So the real idea behind this is making sure that everybody in the organization understands enough about the business that when they're making decisions every day and taking action, that they're doing it in the best interest of the business, which in turn is the best interest for them, right? And long-term employment and growth in the business. So in a nutshell, that's what we mean by open book management.
I like that a lot. We're trying to practice it here. We're growing ourselves, and I think most of the mills out there are in different stages of either, they might be long-term and they've already done it. We just moved off our farm into town to be part of the economic recovery of the town, redevelopment, and then of course all this happens, and we just moved in the fall. And then this slapped us, and we had hired some employees. So we were engaging the employees to understand the flow. We haven't really brought them into the financials so much yet, but I see where there'd be a benefit. But just the cause and effect of, if we don't get the fiber clean, it slows down the next process, or we can't make a quality product. And so I do think that open book really applies to all of us here, making sure that everybody's got skin in the game, so to speak. Exactly.
And I know that there is, especially small businesses, closely held private businesses. There's certainly a lot of fears about that being open with a lot of that information. And all I would say to that is that, you really got to dig deep as a leader and be a little humble, a little vulnerable about your business. The thing about it is that a lot of times the fears are about what people will think about the financials. Either they're making too much money or they're not making enough, and those kind of fears. The bottom line is that people, your employees already have a perspective of that right now. And so what you're doing is really kind of laying the reality out to them about what's really happening, so they're not necessarily making speculation about what's happening. And from our experience, it's about a 6 times gap in that perception, meaning that if you're making, let's say 5 cents to the, on a dollar in your business, 5% of profit to the business, they're probably thinking it's 6 times of that. That's probably 30, cents. And so they're making decisions based off of that. And they're probably making some decisions thinking that, hey, the owner's probably raking it in and they got cash in the back, and all this kind of thing. And when in reality, it's kind of hard to make money in business, and that most businesses are not making a ton.
Yeah.
And that there's probably that reality kind of changes their behaviors in how they make decisions and what they do within the company.
Yeah. So what are the biggest tips you would give in this time?
No, it's interesting because it's evolved quite a bit. When we you mentioned earlier about kind of our tips, our four tips. Those were some early on tips that we provided when you were kind of running right into the crisis, right?
Yeah.
And they're still relevant. They're certainly relevant, but things have evolved, and you're probably shifting to different challenges right now for businesses. But when we first looked at this is that, and we're using the same kind of 4 steps that we took back in 2009 when we hit the economic recession then, but with a little bit of a twist. The first one that we focused on was we wanted to focus on our people first, and the whole idea was we wanted to keep our employees, in their jobs, right? We didn't want them to lose their jobs because of that economic recovery. With this particular crisis with the virus is that there was another side of that as well, and that was keeping them safe, because we were deemed essential, so we were bringing people into work, but we needed to make sure that our people felt safe at work, and they felt safe when they left work to go home to their families and that sort of thing. So the number one thing we put a focus on was making sure that our people were safe, not only physically but also emotionally. Yeah. About the situation. So we wanted to keep them safe. And then second of all is we wanted to make sure they understood the reality we were in, that, there was a health crisis going on, but there was also a potential economic crisis as well. And that they needed to know that we were doing everything we possibly could to keep them in their jobs and have money flowing into their families and that sort of thing. But to make sure that they understood that if the business could not operate to the levels that was necessary to fund that there would have to be changes made in the business. If we had to do furloughs, or we had to do a shared work program, which is common in Missouri, where we can take employees down to, let's say, a 3-day week that we're paying for, but the 2 days are paid by the state, and they can qualify for the federal assistance and things like that. But those steps would be made based on the financial condition of the business. So since we were open book, we could lay that out for them. We could say, look, if our profitability hit this, or our cash flow hit this particular stage, then these are the decisions that we would need to be made. Mm-hmm. So that open, transparent, honest, reality-based communication was critical. And I would say the other thing about that first step of really focusing on your people is just making sure that there's a consistent communication process set in place. And part of our practices is to always have that in place, where our people know exactly where the business is and the state of the business. Every Wednesday at 2:00, they know exactly where it's at, and they know that meeting's going to be about discussing about the financial and the business status, right?
Yeah.
But we had to carry that through to the health status as well. So, being very consistent, being conscious about what they're going through personally and their emotional stress that they were going through, and just being very straightforward in terms of the communication was very, very important in focusing on our people. The next step we went to was now we had to focus on positive cash flow. And we call these the 4 Ps, by the way. One is people. The second one is positive cash flow. The third one is practices. How do we practice? How do we manage within the business? And the last one is positioning ourselves for the future. And so the second one was positive cash flow, and this, the recommendation I would give to your community is probably still relevant today, is to really understand your cash position. What we like to use the term runway, from your current flow of business, internally generated cash that you're generating in the business, but also any kind of debt support or other means of generating cash. What is your runway? How long does that last you if you were at current business levels? Is that 3 months, or is that 6 months, or is that a year? What is that? And to understand that runway and to be able to extend that runway as far out as you possibly can at this point in time. So when this first started, we kind of encouraged people to take advantages of whatever debt capacity you may have. So if you have a line of credit of $500,000 or $1 million, is to go ahead and fully take advantage of that line of credit. You may not use the funds, and you may have to pay. You may want to just pay it back, but it gives you that ability to have that if you needed it moving forward. And I know people took advantage of PPP, and I'm sure maybe some of your community take advantage of like the Paycheck Protection Programs.
Yeah, I'm sure some of them did. We were late to the game and missed it on the first go round.
Yep. And I think that there's been a lot of miscommunication in how that's rolled out, and if that's forgiven and all those kind of things. I think a lot of that has been kind of worked out, but there's still a bit of a question on some of it.
Yeah.
But that's that's a good program to take advantage of. There's what they call the Main Street loan opportunities, where the federal government's protecting with banks to provide low interest loans as low as like 4%, and a 4-year maturity on those loans, and the first year's interest and principals are deferred. So those are things that would give you that longer cash runway, right, that even if you went didn't need to use it, you have it in reserve, and you can always pay that back, right, if you don't use it. So that was one of the things that we really talk to people. And we have a little tool that's on our website called the Cash Calculator. So if somebody is wanting to understand how to do that and really understand how to put a cash flow projection out there and understand what their runway is, they can use that tool, and with some of our help of our coaches can understand what that is and how to use it. So they're welcome to look that up on our website anytime as well. The next step is what we were calling practices, and what we mean by that is doubling down on the everyday, what we would call great game or open book management practices. And it's what I mean by that is like the huddling process, the forward forecasting, meaning that put your financials together so you can measure on a week by week basis how you're doing financially. And of course, in our environment, we try to get more and more people involved in that process, right? So they all understand that. But if you're not open book, it's still relevant for you, and maybe you're some close leaders in the business, to be looking at that on a consistent basis and really understanding where you are at any time, and understanding the gaps and the variances that you need to go after and to improve on the business. That's what we mean by practices. And the last one was positioning. So this is always the toughest one, Terry, because in the middle of a crisis, it's hard to be thinking, okay, what's going to happen a year from now, when you're just trying to figure out what we're going to do tomorrow, right? Or what we're going to do today. But we really stress that people start looking forward to what happens when this thing turns around, because what we've seen companies make mistake is that they come in and they start cutting some of the fat in the organization, right? So they start cutting expenses because the revenue's down, right? But then they may even go into, cutting some muscle, right? Meaning that they're cutting expenses that actually is going to put them at a disadvantage when the economy turns around. The best example of that is people, where they say, well, the easiest thing is, and we have an example of one of our practitioners up in Canada was given this advice. He said, you just got to take, you got to save the business, cut your people, lay them off. And he was really pushing from doing that, because what happens is that when those people lay off, and then when things turn around, your people aren't there back and ready and prepared to help you with the upturn. So do whatever you can to keep your people employed. And I'd really encourage people to think first about maybe cutting pay or cutting hours and doing those kind of things before they lay off or furlough people, because your people are your best asset to help you in the upturn and to position you for future growth. But that's like cutting muscle when you're cutting your people, right? And some companies, go down to even cutting bone, where they start to, change their bin or cut expenses or reduce capital, investments, things like that actually is the foundation of your business, right? Mm-hmm. And so what happens is when the economy starts to turn up, they're not prepared for it, and they actually have to start investing, and they're going to be late to the party, so to speak. So that's one thing to think about. And the other thing is that you got to start thinking creatively. You don't know what that new normal is going to be, and that's what we meant by bold moves. Is that and I can't tell you who exactly said this, but it was somebody other than us. But people said, don't, a crisis is a horrible thing to waste. And what they mean by that is that, typically in a crisis, it provides a lot of opportunities for businesses. And if you're prepared for those, you can take advantage of those businesses, either taking talent that your competitors have laid off, or opportunities that present themselves because the competitors are not financially stable to take advantage of, and you can take more market share in a time of crisis, those kind of things. So it's important to kind of step back and say, what are my growth and contingency plans? What are some things I could do differently than I'm doing today that may make me even stronger in the future? Mm-hmm. An example of that is a company we worked with that is believe it or not, they're a furniture installer. So office furniture installer. So what they do is big office buildings, they go in and they infill all the offices, right, with furniture and decorations and all of that. Well, that's the business that's probably getting hit the hardest. There's no one at work, right?
Yeah.
And the future of that looks really bad, because I think there's going to be a big reduction in office space, and people wanting to have office space and that sort of thing. So he had to completely reinvent their business. That's a bold move. They had to reinvent their business because they knew that the future of that business was in jeopardy. The one thing that they did was basically reposition their branding as that they had years and years of installing office furniture and infilling. Well, they can also take it out.
Yeah.
So basically they repositioned their branding that, hey, as you take this furniture out and you repurpose the furniture, we can help you with that. So that's the kind of bold moves, kind of creative thinking that needs to be in place. And you need to be thinking about that now, not when the economy turns around, if that makes sense. So that's what we mean by positioning. Think about repositioning your business.
Yeah. And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of us. The artisan term comes in the fact that we're small. So we should be fairly flexible and easy to adapt. It's that ripple effect that I think will hit us. We get really busy this time of year. It's shearing season is just pretty much ended for everybody, getting the fiber off the animals, people getting it ready and sending it to us. But a lot of our clients are taking that fiber to what would have been, we would make finished product for them, and they would take it to a fiber festival to sell, and all those festivals are canceled. So now it's, they're kind of setting on, the pins and needles. And, I think everybody's looking at what that is. They're still eager to get their stuff done with at some point, but I think it's not only us, but our customers have to look at what their new normal is. How are they going to sell it? So I think there's a lot of interest in online sales and
Right.
developing that as well. We had shifted our total focus for our own business coming off farm, kind of tapping into ag tourism, to in town, tapping into, the locals, being part of the growing scene, and big walk-in. We were big studio for classes, big, little space to sell stuff, an experience. And right now, to be compliant with CDC and all of that, it's an ever-changing mark, and it just doesn't make sense. So we've kind of had to adjust and shut our doors and say open by appointment, but at the same time, we're shifting our gears as to, what we're trying to do. And so a lot of this is just really positive reinforcement that it's okay to have a business plan, but it's got to be live and fluent.
Yes. Yes.
Or fluent,
yes.
should I say.
Yes. And to actively use it, and I think a lot of, businesses may put together a business plan, but they don't they don't actively work that plan.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of like a one and done. We did it to get up and running. I had to have it to get my initial loan for my equipment. Maybe we ought to dust that off and take another look.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And to get more people involved in it, as much as you possibly can. We're really big in getting in employee involvement. We're a very high involvement culture, right? So, and I think that that's a benefit of helping companies creatively figure out what they can do to take advantage of the new normal, right? And because it's outside just the entrepreneur with the leading entrepreneur with the ideas. And so we do a lot of things to try to keep people involved in the process. One exercise I'd share with you that is just kind of interesting that one of our practitioners did is a lot of times, you want ideas from your employees, but the employees don't feel comfortable with those ideas, or they don't feel comfortable in sharing those ideas for whatever reason, or they don't feel like there's anything for it. Why be creative? That kind of thing. But an exercise to do is just to open up that conversation, right? And have the employees, share with you what causes that, what causes that reluctance to share those ideas.
Quality control here. This is Oliver. Oliver, can you say hi?
Hello, Oliver. So,
I think he's telling us it's lunchtime here.
There you go. Future leader of the company.
Yeah. Take him to Nicole. Okay, gang. Sorry about that interruption, but everybody from our side will get that because most everybody's family owned and
run. Oh yeah.
In these times, it is bring your family to work.
Yes, absolutely. Or you're working from where your family hangs out, right?
Exactly. And it's kind of twofold for me right at the moment. And I actually find that a benefit more than anything. It keeps it real, and I cherish the extra time with them.
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of interesting. I had an entrepreneur tell me this the other day, is that he has more empathy about the kind of the work-life balance.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, in that office structure is that when you left at 5, you left work and you left work at home, there. And now kind of work and life kind of is blended together.
Yeah. So
you kind of appreciate it. You're being a little bit more flexible. And it's kind of interesting to think about how that may continue, where, we talk about work-life balance. It may be, work-life, just being blended,
Yeah.
the blending of work and life, and then it just happens, and how do you how do you accommodate that as a business owner?
Yeah. Yeah, the people part really resonated with me too. When we were on our farm, we didn't hire because we were in a constrained environment and we were in my home. Here we got some really great staff on board, and then we had to shut down for our state. So, we couldn't have our employees in, and I really was at a fear I was going to lose them, but luckily, I kept them and I actually gained one. Right now they are a priority for me because can't run the business without them. And
Yes.
I tried keeping it afloat, as well as I could behind closed doors. I really appreciate my people.
Yeah. And the more you can find ways to to connect them to the business, the more it provides you as the owner the freedom
Yeah.
to think bigger and further out and all of those kind of things. So it can be pretty powerful.
Well, good. I see I've kept you for a good half hour. And I do so appreciate your time and dealing with my hectic schedule of not getting back yesterday because of a breakdown we had here. So I really appreciate you coming in and doing this. Any parting thoughts for us that
No, other than just keep your chin up and look for the opportunities. I'm hoping that most businesses have kind of have gotten their footing a bit and understand, okay, I got I've kind of figured out where I'm at. Now it's really trying to understand where you want to go with the business and really take the opportunities and keep your chin up and doing that. There's a lot of resources on our website that can help companies begin to think that way, and use the principles of the game to help them manage the business and open up their minds a bit to that. And I think that Dan's probably shared with you that Steve Baker, one of my colleagues, and I have a podcast every Friday that we just kind of reach out that's available to anyone. That just talks about the different success stories and challenges that the community is having and kind of working through this and all the various ways that businesses have addressed that. So if people are interested in these ideas, that's something they could do every Friday and probably walk away with a lot of various ideas from other small businesses.
Perfect. We will make sure that we include that link. And Janet and Dan were giving me some other resource links to attach to the end of this as well. I highly encouraged everybody to go out and check out your website. Tons of resources there, and all good stuff. So again, I really want to thank you for taking your time out, being our guinea pig. You're our first speaker, and hopefully we'll get all this technical stuff nailed down. Maybe Oliver won't make a show in every video.
Yeah.
But then again, who knows? Maybe he'll
that's reality. That's what makes it real. That's what makes it real.
Awesome.
Well, thanks,
again,
Terry.
I thank you for your time. Everybody, I'm giving them a big plug. Great Game of Business. Go check it out. They've got a great updated book out. So find out more.
Good.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks,
Thank
Terry.
you.
Have a great day.
You too.